States of Canada and United States and Canada, looking at the history and government of the United States and Canada. So let's take a look. So first of all, we got the United States. When it comes to the United States, the history, again, we have to look back at the indigenous. We kind of went over that a little bit in lesson 7. The indigenous peoples were here before us, and they were essential in the formation of the United States because, well, they were living here before all of us were. So they had to be moved out for Europeans and Africans and other nations to be moved in. So that is that situation. When it comes to the United States, a key date to remember is 1776. 1776. And a key thing to remember is that the United States was originally a British colony. The United States was a British colony. British colony pretty much means that people from England or from the British Islands came over here and made new settlements for themselves while maintaining their British identity. However, as the years pressed on from the 1600s till 1776, people began to form a new American identity. That new American identity leads us to the American Revolution. So with the American Revolution in 1776, the 13 colonies rebel against the British government. In the battles of Lexington and Concord, they fight, and in various different battles led by many men like George Washington, these United States were able to form their own independent nation. Remember, 1776 is when we declare independence. Now, the United States doesn't get fully independent when it comes to making its own nation until around 1783, when we make the Constitution of the United States. And then that Constitution gets fully ratified and accepted by all the states by 1789. Alrighty, so the United States is moving forward. So 1776, we'll move on forward. Now the United States, in between that time of the Civil War, is increasing in its population. But the Civil War is looming imminent because the United States has to figure out what to do in regards to slavery. Now, in the modern world, we believe slavery is completely immoral. But in those olden days, they didn't think so. And there was a constant debate on the morality of slavery in the United States and all around the world. But this issue became a huge problem. So the states in the North and the states in the South fought all over whether they should have slavery, and also fought over multiple different things. They fought over different tax rules and regulations. They fought over whether states have the right to make their own laws. It's a combination of multiple things, but the central theme that was used in the Civil War was the theme of slavery. So the Civil War was fought over states issues and slavery issues. So that is that situation. The North, also known as the Union, succeeded and defeated the Southern Confederates, who separated themselves in the United States. Because of that, slavery was abolished in the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, and slavery was ended in the United States in general. Now, after that, there was a huge span of time where there was a difficulty in racial issues between blacks and whites, but we won't go into detail in regards to that. Next in the United States history is industrialization. During 1870s and 1880s, the United States is industrializing and expanding westward. So we're saying New York City is built up, building huge factories in New York, Chicago. Not only that, we want to go out into the other parts of the United States. So not only on the East Coast, but going out into the Midwest, going out across the South, growing out across the West. So the United States is expanding westward. More and more people are traveling out there. So in that westward expansion, the United States is dominating the land. And again, is coming into contact with more Native American groups. The more the United States expands westward, the more it impacts the Native American groups who have to move further and further west. The more we expand westward, the more industrialized we become. The more industrialized we become, the more cities are formed, new groups of people come, and the United States starts to look more of what we see today. After that, we have the two major world wars. We get World War I and we got World War II. Key things to remember. In both world wars, World War I and World War II, we do not want to get involved. We see them as European wars. This concept is called isolationism, where we say we're going to isolate ourselves and stay in our own sector of the world. However, something happens to force us in the war. In World War I, it's the sinking of the Lusitania and other attacks against our ships. And in World War II, it's the attack of Pearl Harbor, which sinks our Navy ships in Hawaii. So you see, World War I, we don't want to get involved, attack our ships, we get involved. World War II, we don't want to get involved, attack our ships, we get involved. Because of these two world wars, it makes the United States the most powerful nation in the world. Because when the United States enters into those wars, we interfere, we change the dynamic on the side we join. The side we join becomes stronger, defeats the enemy. In World War I, it's the Germans. In World War II, it's also the Germans, but including the Japanese. So because of World War I and World War II, the United States becomes a notable force in the world. So it becomes stronger. Other things happen across our history. We have the Cold War. This Cold War is experienced between us and the Soviet Union, aka Russia. This Cold War pretty much means it's a war. So like there's animosity, but it says cold because there's no strictly direct fighting between the United States and the Soviet Union. There's like indirect fighting through different wars. You'll learn about that in world history. And as the years progress, the United States makes policies in regards to communism because the United States doesn't like communism because communism is a different type of economic system. We are capitalist. The Russians and the Soviet Union were communist. We believe in free markets. They believe in controlled markets, or like the government controls everything. We believe to be free and do what we want to do. And in communism, the government tells you what you should do. That's a simplistic explanation, but there you go. Eventually, the Cold War ends. We win. And then we get into modern U.S. history, where we fight our different wars in the Middle East and across the North Africa and Eastern Europe. And new things are happening each and every day in our history. So there you go. Next, we move on to United States' government, our government. Now, essential to know, our government is made up of 3 branches. There are 3 branches of government. They are executive, legislative, and judiciary. Our country is a constitutional republic. What that means is that we abide by the rules set forward by the founding fathers in the Constitution. So we follow the Constitution. The Constitution is the rule of law in the United States. So everything comes from there. When we get to 3 branches, comes from the Constitution. Now, the 3 branches, the executive, that is the president. Head of the executive right now is Mr. Joe Biden, who is currently the president. And then we'll have elections next year to decide who will be president afterwards. The executive is responsible for enforcing all the laws made by the legislative. So the legislative is pretty much Congress. There are two parts to Congress. There's the Senate and the House of Representatives. The Senate and the House of Representatives. The House of Representatives is closer to the people, power to the people, and then the Senate is farther away from the people, and they're responsible for kind of, cooling down the people from, making rash decisions in the House of Representatives. So they're the ones who make up the laws. So any law that is federal law comes from Congress or the legislative. The judiciary is the Supreme Court. They pretty much decide on all major cases in our country, deciding if they are constitutional or unconstitutional. Remember, we're a constitutional republic, so everything centers around that constitution. If it lines with that, then we do it. If it doesn't, we should not be doing it. That's pretty much the rule of law. In our system, we have a system of checks and balances. Checks and balances, balancing the weights. It's pretty much different ways the different parts of the government can manage each other. For example, if Congress has a rule, let's say everyone gets ice cream for 365 days. Congress says we will pass this law. It gets passed by the legislature, and then it has to be signed and approved by the president. But say the president doesn't like ice cream, he hates ice cream, he can veto it. So that is a check that the president has, vetoes it, and then it goes back to Congress, and Congress can figure out if they want to go against his veto or not. And that's another check that they have. The judiciary can also have a check or balance and be like, it is constitutional for everyone to get ice cream for 365 days a year. So they have different little things that they can do to manage each other, kind of call each other out, or make sure that everyone's following the rules. Next part of our government is like kind of that federalism. Federalism is the concept of the states and the federal government. So the states are responsible for making their own laws. So Texas, we can make our own laws in our own little local districts. And then the federal government can make their own laws. And then sometimes the federal government and the state has to go back and forth. But it's been generally seen that the federal government has higher authority over the states. But that's a constant debate that goes on in our country. So that is the American government. Next thing we get is Canada's history. So let's look at Canada's history. Canada's history is primarily focused on this back and forth situation between three major groups: British, French, and the Indigenous peoples. British, French, and Indigenous peoples. So the French come in, take over a good amount of land, also known as New France, that good portion of Canada, and a good portion of the United States used to be part of French or New France. Then the British take over and create their own British Confederacy there. But there's a constant back and forth on who is the rightful owner of that land. Is it the Indigenous people? Is it the French? Is it the British? Constant back and forth. With the situation with the Canadians is that the Canadians also get an influx of new groups that come from Europe and Eastern Europe. So with this, Canada history is pretty much a simple relationship, or not simple, a complicated relationship between the three major groups. Eventually, it comes down to Canada making a set of rules and legislation to kind of form its own Canadian government, so that they can have a nice solidified system in which those three major groups can be satisfied. As the years press on, Canada is formed as its own nation. However, it is part of that Commonwealth, the relationship with England. It still has a relationship with England. Eventually, the Canadians eventually make a truce. Canada is a bilingual nation. It's a bilingual nation. So if you are speaking English, Vous supposez parler français encore. So if you are speaking English, you are also to speak French again. If you say something in English, you have to say it in French in the same way, but in French. So that relationship between France and England, that French and English background is the constant history of Canada. And then the indigenous are in the background also saying, well, we were here first, so why are you still here? Next part we get here, we get to the history of the Canadian government. So the Canadian government is a parliamentary system. A parliamentary system. A parliamentary system pretty much means is that there are different groups and factions in a parliament. A parliament is like a giant congress. It's like a giant congress represented by the different provinces. So the different provinces have their different representative based off of population and try to base it off of equal representation in the parties. So different groups and different sections make up a parliamentary system. They vote on what is law, what is not law. So the parliament is pretty much the supreme thing there. The different members of the parliament choose the prime minister. That prime minister is head of the executive branch. So right now, the prime minister of Canada is Trudeau. Trudeau, he is the prime minister. He is head of the executive. Again, similar to the United States, he is responsible for executing the laws and make sure Parliament is in good shape. Then they also have a Supreme Court, again, similar to the United States, determining if everything is aligned with their laws and rules and regulations. The different provinces, of course, have their own little governments and that they're responsible for. And then the territories of Canada also have their different responsibilities and governments. Again, the Parliament is connected to the British style. Both the United States and Canada have British and Roman combinations of their governments. The British and the Romans play a huge effect on how both of the countries have their government style. The concept of a House and a Senate, the concept of a ruling authority. Now, the major difference in the government of Canada is that Canada has a king. The king of Canada is King Charles III. They're still under the monarchy. The United States, we don't like monarchy. We don't like kings. We have presidents and congressmen, but no one is our king. So British still control Canada governmentally. So the King of England still is the King of Canada. So that is government and history. We'll see you later for lesson 9.